Previously on Tales from Tech Titans.
To this day, I think good leaders are products of bad managers.
After your time with those consultancies, you actually went back to context. You don't see that very often, as in people going back to a previous employer. Probably not often enough. What kind of encouraged you to go back, or how did you feel about that, or what kind of enticed you to go back?
Now we're in this information revolution, or soon to be AI revolution, where you get paid for what you know.
Yeah.
If you don't know anything, you're not going to get paid.
Yeah, that's right.
You're not going to get paid anything. I think as a weird byproduct of our industry, if you want to earn more money, you have to step into a management role. When I did step into that leadership role, eventually I identified that within the business. We talked around that with our leadership team back in the UK. All right, lightning round. Early bird or night owl? If it wasn't tech, where would you be working now? How do you stay on top of technology when it's rapidly evolving? Great question. Yeah. A lot of podcasts.
Yeah.
So obviously Tech Titans.
Obviously. Yeah.
You ready?
Was in that role you were head of APAC, was leadership a natural step for you?
Leadership was interesting because it's one of those things. I never saw myself in any kind of managerial or leadership role longer term. But I think as a weird byproduct of our industry, if you want to earn more money, you have to step into a management role. Mm-hmm. And when I did step into that leadership role, eventually I identified that within the business. We talked around that with our leadership team back in the UK and said, you know what, there has to be another way. We can't just put highly technical specialist people into a management role because that's the only way they're going to get additional revenue or additional salary. Why don't we have a highly specialist technical skill track and then a managerial track, and we kind of split that out so you can have year on year pay rises. You don't cap out at a certain thing. If you're a principal consultant, you can have that same pay rise as any managerial person as well. So identifying that, changing that within the business, but also we're seeing that as a trend at the moment. You see things like staff engineer coming out as well, which are not leadership positions, but they're quite senior, and fellows at IBM's have been doing that for quite some time as well.
That's the kind of deconstruction of the career ladder, the historic, right? As in, there's only one way, it's up and down. Career jungle gym, I've kind of heard that phrase thrown about. I quite like the kind of beehive kind of visualization of the career these days, where it's kind of hexagons, you can move sideways and across. And but it's interesting, isn't it? Because what you're talking about there as well is basically monetizing your skills and experience and passion.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the name of the game, right? In a career, that's what people are trying to maximize their earning potential for what they do.
Well, and I've said this before, where we used to have the industrial revolution, right? Where you could make widgets, you get paid per widget or per hour or whatever it might be. Now we're in this information revolution, or soon to be AI revolution, where you get paid for what you know.
Yeah.
If you don't know anything, you're not going to pay.
That's right.
You're not going to get paid anything. So the more you know, naturally, 9 times out of 10, you're probably going to get a little bit extra.
But there's also, if you want to get paid more, make the pie bigger.
Yep.
Which I think gets lost somewhere along the line. That's the quickest way to earn more, right? As in, you want a bigger slice of the pie, we'll make the pie bigger. The slice is going to look way more interesting, and that's bringing knowledge, it's bringing different skills. It's yes, every organization needs leadership, it needs people to grow the business and lead the strategy and people and influence. But as you say, there's a lot of people out there with a lot of skills that don't have that aspiration, and nor should they. It doesn't suit them, but they can contribute to the growth of an organization in a different way.
Yeah, and I like to see your opinion on this from your experience, kind of flipping the podcast back around.
Yeah.
I'm of the opinion not everyone's cut out for leadership, just like not everyone's cut out to be a heart surgeon, sort of thing, right? Do you feel that's the case as well?
It's interesting, isn't it? I think, again, there's a bit of a nurture-nature situation here. I don't think you come across like the Peter principle, right? Which is people promoted to the point of incompetence. I think people don't often know what they're getting into with leadership, or why they want to be a leader, or what they're looking to achieve as a leader. And then it just leads to a bunch of frustration if they're dealing with the crap that no one else wants to deal with, or the problems, and they're not necessarily seeing the upside or the opportunity. So again, I think it kind of comes down to someone's innate motivation for why they want to rock up to work and what they want to contribute. Again, it's interesting that your outlook is very much about, you love building things, you love fixing problems, seeing opportunities. I've got a very similar motivation. There's nothing that motivates me more than kind of seeing an opportunity or something over here that you can kind of, or a group grow and thrive and kind of get better at what they're doing. And I think as I've got older and more experienced, I've realized that's probably my definition of leadership. And that's the bit that I enjoy from leadership, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, building business, building customers up, building people.
Yeah.
Right? Like helping nurture people. And that's why I really enjoy the mentoring side of things as well, because I get probably more out of it than the mentee does, because I learn a lot about myself. I learn a lot about them and things that they're experiencing. So I'd strongly encourage anyone to kind of do that mentoring kind of thing as well.
Well, it kind of ticks that box when you talk about the best way to learn is to teach.
Yep.
It's very hard as a mentor to give someone advice and then think, but I'm not doing that myself. I work with a bunch of guys that used to work for me in the UK, and they're building an incredible recruitment business over there. And we catch up every few weeks, but I'm giving them advice, and I'm thinking, am I doing this over here too? This is a little bit hypocritical, isn't it?
What's that saying? Do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah, that's right. To be fair, it probably means the team here get a harder time because I hear what those guys are up to and come back with that feedback. But so I'm not sure if I've answered your question, but I think look, there's definitely people that kind of gravitate towards leadership and they thrive and they enjoy it and it motivates them and it gives them that kind of sense of purpose. I think it comes back to your why. Why do you want to be at work? It is also, which I think gets overlooked, it's a big emotional commitment being a leader.
Yeah, yes it is.
And that's a weird statement to make, but it doesn't switch off at 5 o'clock. I had a conversation with someone in the team on Friday, and she'd been on leave, and she asked me a question. She said, "Did you deal with this while I was away?" And I couldn't remember if I had. And I said, and I gave a really fluffy answer. And I thought, and it played on my mind all weekend. And I thought, did I do that? Did I not do it? I gave that person a fluffy answer. If I was that person, I wouldn't be happy with that answer. So I phoned them on Monday and I just said, I want to just come back to that question. The truth is, I don't actually know if I did or not, but I will address it. And I will. And she laughed and said, I hadn't thought about it after our conversation once. And I'm sure you didn't, but I did.
I think that in itself, that's the difference between good leadership and bad management, because you've taken something, you've gone out and you've thought about it in depth and say, hey, listen, I made a mistake. I'm sorry.
Yep.
I did or didn't do this thing, and here's the action I'm going to perform next in order to satisfy your original question.
Yep.
Whereas you see those poor managers that will just be, I'm going to bark instruction. This is how it is. This is how it's going to be. I'm never wrong. When I enter the room, people be quiet, listen to me kind of thing.
That's right.
Yeah, and we've all had those experiences. And I think that's what got me. And back to your question earlier, saying the why, I think that's what got me. It's like, and again, I want to say this, that I genuinely think good leaders are a product of bad managers, because I've seen how all those bad managers have operated previously and say, you know what, I can fix this. I can do much better than this. And this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to be transparent. I'm going to be servant type leadership. I'm going to lean into vulnerability. I'm going to do all these things, all the good books say. And I'm going to try to build a team, build them up, and keep them at the forefront of my mind. Think about certain questions they may have over the weekend. And you're right, it doesn't cut off at 5 p.m. because you're always thinking like, oh, did I say that right? What? And you second guess, triple and quadruple guess yourself and all the things that you say. And then ultimately you come out with hopefully a transparent type of answer, or a conversation at least, to say, this is what I thought, this is what I think it should be. But one time out of 10, sometimes you just say, you know what, just like, potentially with children, you just need to stop them poking themselves in the eye and say, no, that's enough.
Yeah, that's right. It's interesting, I was reflecting as you were talking about you kind of take by becoming a leader, you take the bad bits of it's almost like a Frankenstein's monster is what you're describing, isn't it, right? It's like all the opposite. It's a patchwork of experiences. I think as you go along, it becomes this bit, because there's definitely, I also think, I've worked with some exceptional leaders, and some bad managers and along the way. And you definitely look at stuff and say, like, I wouldn't handle it that way, or I look at that and how they handled that situation, and that was exceptional.
And you can build that into your story as well. So when you're having a team meeting or when you're giving performance-related conversations or giving feedback, I always like to say, and everyone always kind of rolls their eyes and saying, "Oh, Lucas, it's story time again."
Yeah.
So then with Grandpa Lucas, I say, "This happened to me at this point in my life. This was the outcome. This is how it made me feel, and this is why I'm taking this decision, or I'm doing this action, or I'm helping you with this thing, because I didn't want you to go through that as well, or feel like that, or have that thrust upon you." And then this is the next steps that we're going to be doing as in terms of actions. I think that approach, that story type of approach, has people coming on that journey with you.
Yeah, look, I completely agree. I think we talked about feedback earlier, but I think one of the key tenets of feedback and successful feedback is being able to demonstrate personal care, and where that feedback's coming, and it's coming from a good place. I saw a question someone posed on LinkedIn last week, and it sort of said, my boss has given me difficult feedback that I'm uncomfortable with. How do I deal with that? Or something. And I wrote an answer to saying, well, firstly, start with the fact that your boss has probably got good intentions. They haven't given you that feedback to be nasty or spiteful. They're telling you that because they're trying to help you, and they're coming from a good place. So maybe reframe the story you're telling yourself and look at it through that lens, and then decide how you feel about the feedback afterwards.
Potentially, but it's also on the leader to identify maybe that individual never had any kind of feedback of that type of nature.
Yes.
It's always been from a very negative. They would have had bad managers beforehand.
Yeah, of course.
So they maybe get like a PTSD kind of thing and get
Definitely
roped back into that previous conversation, saying, "Oh, I felt this small before, and now this is doing the same thing." So they in that fight or flight thing, and they just shut down.
Yeah, so, there's this people that grew up maybe with tough parents that told them they were never good enough, or criticised everything that they did, and then suddenly they get to work and they hear the same thing. And that's about deeply building bonds with your team and getting to know a bit more about their backstory and who they are and what motivates them. I think, again, that's, to me, is what good leadership is about. Yeah. And so that was the other point I was going to make on leadership. And I read this, maybe 10 years ago, but leadership should be defined by followship. And a good leader is someone that people want to follow. It's not who, I want to be the leader and we're going this way. It doesn't really work if no one comes with you on that journey.
Yeah, that's right. And you see that in the police force, or you see that in the military. Like the leader always goes, they break the door down first and they go in first, sort of thing, right? So
we actually, the episode we recorded before Christmas with Andy Foster, he'd been I want to say a sergeant, someone very important anyway in the British Army. And we were talking about in the Army, you just think because you've got the stripes, people are going to follow your orders. It's actually harder. They won't just mindfully just follow your orders. You've still got to win the hearts and minds of the troops and the soldiers that you're leading to get them, because they're also putting their life on the line. It's got much more consequences than when we rock up at the office and we write a bit of code wrong, or
that's right.
we forget to make a phone call. Someone could literally die if they get their decision wrong. So he said, actually, winning the hearts and minds is much more important in that context. They won't just follow because that's what you think they're in the army to do.
Yeah, and also when you're trying to influence change, like security, and I always say this, that security is in a position where, yes, it's important. Yes, we're trying to do things, but ultimately we're getting other people to do things or change actions.
Yeah.
So if you're working with an infrastructure team, you're saying, you know what, hey, could you stop what you're doing? Don't prioritize your stuff, prioritize mine.
Yeah.
In order to achieve this objective that's going to satisfy my criteria.
That's true. Yeah.
Are you able to do that? And you can't do that by barking orders, because people, they don't have to.
That's right.
Do what they're told, really, because you're not their leader, you're not their manager, or that kind of thing. Right. So you have to influence your peers, their peers, or their managers, or the senior leadership team. Say, hey, that story, this is what happens, this is what can happen, this is what has happened, this is why we should be doing these things, and naturally earn that trust. Eventually people come to the realization saying, you know what, I'm not barking orders, this is something we should be doing naturally, and this is how we can do it, and I'm here to help.
And that's also probably how the world of work has changed in the last 20, 30, 40 years, which is that the leader or the boss historically could get away with just barking orders and just do this. There's probably less challenge, less question, less engagement from the people that the orders were coming to. Whereas I think we live in a world now where, quite rightly so, people want to know why, or they want to know the purpose or the point or the influence, as you say, to get things done.
Yeah, I think that's a generational thing. Like, our parents were telling us what to do, how to do it, when to do it, and we always ask why. And then the next generation, they question and they question again, sort of thing. And I think there's probably a study in this, but I think we're seeing a lot more books coming out on leadership than we have in the past. There's probably more academic studies around this, like, enterprise behaviors and psychology and all those kind of things, and they kind of start writing their books like the Simon Sinek's or your Brené Brown sort of thing. I don't think we saw that many leadership books. We saw management, we saw tasks oriented types of books and how to get things done, but not really those really good leadership types.
I think you make a good point. And why they're making those books, because there's demand for it, right? Because people, they want to be good leaders. They want to do a good job. They want to be better. They want to be more effective. They want to have a better impact on people as well. It's interesting. I wonder what the future of that will look like. It's right. You left Context in 2000. Were you the COVID cliche? Were you the Great Resignation? Was it you'd had enough and you tapped out?
No. So what happened was it was interesting. I was walking to work. I got a phone call from our director in the UK. He says, "Hey, are you sitting down?" And then he told me the news about the acquisition. I'm like, all right, well, immediate thoughts like, how's this going to affect the team? How's this going to affect us? Or how's this going to affect, the brand and all those kind of things? And then I think it was 2, maybe 3 weeks later, COVID happened. So, so it was a fantastic 6 months because there was a acquisition happening in the background. There was COVID happening. And there's like everyone else, probably, definitely around Australia, but probably around the world was tuned into, especially us in Victoria, was tuned into the Dan Daly. With his, is he wearing a North Face or is he not? Sort of things. Is it a good day? Is it a bad day? Right. So everyone's always tuned into that every morning. So there was that going on in people's minds. Consultancies were not doing very well at the time because no one was investing, because no one knew what's going to happen. A business is going to be shutting down or not. And then there was acquisition happening at the same time. So we'll drip fed pieces of information of this is what your benefits are. So one example is Context did 5 weeks of annual leave, Accenture only do 4. They're like, oh, well, what's going to happen with that? Then you have to solve a problem there and all those kind of things. So very interesting 6 months. But I was at one of those sliding door moments where I was thinking, what is the next step after consultancy? Because once you start going up and you're leading a team, leading a consultancy, what's next? You can either start your own or go somewhere else in cyber. I could have gone internally, ran a security testing team internally. I'm like, I've been there, done that. What's next? And that's when I said, I can go down the CISO pathway. So I made that decision prior to COVID kicking off in 2019. Went out to every single CISO or CISO that I knew. And I said, hey, give me a no BS assessment on an actual day in the life of. And I spoke to about a dozen or so, and some people were saying this is the worst job in the world. Others were saying this is fantastic, and there was always, rhyme and reason sort of thing behind it. And I eventually talked to a really good friend of mine and a good mentor of mine, Liam Connolly, who's the CISO at Seek. It was meant to be a 30-minute coffee, ended up being a 2.5-hour conversation around everything, the portfolio, what it's like, the day in, day out. And he turns around and says, hey, how about if I create a role for you, come in as the head of corporate security, and I, in the background, will train you to be a CISO. You'll get an understanding of what it's like internally. You'll come in, solve problems, you'll do your job, but at a certain time frame, what's going to happen is you can either take over my role or find a role that's a CISO elsewhere, but you'll be in a position to make that decision yourself. So it was that interesting kind of situation where I was like, do I go that consultancy path or that CISO path? I can start a consultancy whenever. I can join a consultancy whenever. This is one of those things I'm like, you know what, if I don't go down this road, I might be kicking myself sort of thing. So I went down that road and ultimately ended up at Seek with Liam.
So this is flashbacks of your high school.
That's right.
Right, and NAB again. Why do you think you did that? It's very generous.
And that's, again, good leadership. And he and I talk about this type of thing all the time. We talk probably in a fortnightly, every 3 weeks type of basis for, now still. And I would consider him one of those individuals that is a good leader because he's been a product of really bad managers. And he goes through stories about, just like I have, around bad management and outcomes and all this kind of things that's happened. And he says, you know what, I'm not going to have that with my team. I'm not going to be that person. This is what I can do better. Here's an opportunity to give back to someone. And, throughout my career, there's always been someone that saw something in me.
Yeah.
Justin Waite said, "Hey, I'll teach you pen testing." There's been Charles Gilman who said, "Hey, come on in and do this thing." There's been Paul Byrne who said, "Hey, here's context. Let me do an introduction for you." Yep. So all these people along that journey have identified something in me, and so did he, because he's been in that situation as well.
So there's another lesson there as well, isn't there? Which is a couple of things from that experience as well, which is actually invest in your network. One of the things I think I observe is that someone sits in a job for 2 or 3 years, 4 years, they get dissatisfied, something goes awry, breaks down, I want to look for a new job, update their resume, start pumping it out through Seek or LinkedIn. But they haven't really invested in their network. They don't know who's who in the zoo. They've not made, you reached out to a dozen CISOs, as you said. Not many people would do that. You've had other people in your network that have recommended you for roles, and I think that's something that has probably been a key feature in helping you to get to where you've got to, and it's something I'm always encouraging people to do. When you're looking for a job, don't be passive. LinkedIn is a networking tool. It's not a job board. Use it to network. Go and invest. Go and meet these people. Ask if you can buy them a coffee. I reckon last year maybe half a dozen different C-suite tech leaders, I coached them through that exact process of how to find a job and use LinkedIn to network, and they're all now in jobs. And I think it gets lost. Does that make sense?
It does. And also it's really difficult to get your first CISO role. Because just like we always talk about in cyber, you need a job to get experience, and you need experience to get a job.
Yeah.
But when you're first entering the cybersecurity workforce, your decisions don't have catastrophic outcomes. Because you might miss that email, you might miss that alert, and something happens, or some malware outbreaks on a handful of computers or something like that.
Yeah.
When you're in a CISO role, if you mess something up, it's potentially organizational wide or organizational, stopping the organization from functioning, sort of thing. So there can be some genuinely catastrophic outcomes. Yeah. So there's a real reluctance to hire first-time CISOs as well who don't have that experience, right? So having been in that situation at Seek with Liam, I got like a bit of a warm entry into it. So that helped me quite a lot.
But I guess, and this is the point I think I was trying to make earlier, which is there aren't, I don't think, a huge number of organizations with the size team where they could do that. Bring someone on as Liam did to bring you into that role, essentially as a succession plan in some ways for himself or for another organization. And I think that's where it's quite challenging for a career in cybersecurity, and hence why consultancy is probably such a great way to build that experience and I suppose career breadth to set you up for the future.
Yeah, and honestly, and when I talked to Liam and I asked him the question, why did you hire me? Because usually I want to ask, I'm curious why, not just to, inflate my ego or anything like that, but just curious, what was the why? He said one of the key factors coming in was that I came from a consulting background, because security, like I said earlier, is about influencing people to make certain changes or do certain things. You're asking them to take time out of their day to do your stuff. And how do you do that? During consulting, you naturally have the ability, or you learn the ability to go into a situation, rapidly assess the room, to say, that one's super technical, that one's not, that one's this, that one's that. Yep. And you can adjust your language accordingly to help cut through some of the things that you're trying to achieve.
So again, I love that, the starting point of that, which was that you asked why hired you. It's one of my sort of pet peeves, probably the too wrong word. We spend so much time unpacking our failures to understand where we went wrong. but I think unpacking our successes gives us something we can repeat for the future. I don't kind of subscribe wholly to this notion of luck. There's certain aspects of life where we are lucky, but you weren't lucky you got that job, right?
I like to think I'm lucky sometimes. Or that, but
there is elements of luck in life, right? But you weren't lucky. You put yourself out there. You met with 12 or a dozen CISOs. You talked about that. You built that relationship. Liam took you on. He put you into that role. You then said, "Hey, why? I need to unpack that. Why did you hire me?" Because that's something that you can learn and other people can learn from to replicate for the future. And it's easy when you don't get the job to say, "Why didn't you hire me?" And they'll say, "Oh, poor culture fit," or some bullshit answer.
You didn't meet the criteria.
Which is completely unhelpful. But I'm interested in that kind of unpacking success strategies. It's like, if you get in a cybersecurity context, someone attempts to breach, which I'm sure happens multiple times a day, but there's a big breach attempt and you successfully stop that breach happening, unpack why. Because that's a learning for the future to be able to replicate.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that can be seen in everything that we do, but particularly in our own careers. Ask, why did you hire me? Why did you promote me?
And I think naturally in cybersecurity, we're pessimistic.
Yeah.
So we always question what went wrong, why did it go wrong? And you're right. And that's a really good point you make around focusing on why did something go in a positive way?
Yeah.
What did we do, or what did we invest in? Or who did we invest in order to have that outcome? Or that project we said we should have done 12 months ago and completed. This is the outcome of that.
Well, it's a mislearning, right? Because the repetition of success is what we're after. Often I'll say to one of the recruiters, but why did you place that role, or why did that client choose to work with you? I got lucky, I called at the right time, or I just stumbled across this candidate. No. If you think it was luck, you've got nothing you can replicate in the future. We've got to be able to understand that. And sometimes it comes down because you just worked really hard. You spent hours looking at every profile on LinkedIn until you found that one random unicorn that the client was looking for. That's fine. At least you know what you can replicate.
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, it's just a kind of personal thing I'm quite interested in as a pursuit. As well as joining Seek, you've also got a whole range of other interests, right? On the professional sense, I was reading, I've got them listed here because I couldn't remember them all. You had Crest on their advisory board, DroneSec on their advisory board as well, Australian Women in Security Network on their board, also B-Sides. You're in part the organisational board for that as well. You're a busy person, right?
It's weird. Like, I feel, when you read that out, it seems like I'm busy, but at the same time, I don't feel like I'm busy sometimes.
Would your wife disagree with that statement?
Yeah.
Yes, she would, yeah. That's the litmus test, by the way. But how did you get involved in those things? What inspired you to kind of get involved in those things?
So Crest, I'm a big fan of Crest. So when I was in the UK working for Context, I was, doing my Crest certifications, because you kind of have to, sort of thing with pen testing. And I just leaned into what it's about. Setting a certain bar for our industry, specifically around, back then it was pen testing. Now they've gone into other areas as well. So when I came back with Context as well, when I came back to Australia, and then ultimately ran Context in Australia here, we were a Crest company, so we're associated with Crest or a partner with Crest. So I thought it was a good opportunity for me to give back also and help lead the direction. So any Crest member company can nominate themselves to be on an advisory board. It's a selection process and you ultimately get on. So what Crest is like in Australia, I like to think that I played a very, very small little partner in a positive sense. DroneSec was interesting. So Mike Monick is a really good friend. He's doing fantastic things with DroneSec. And actually during COVID, he was living in a city and I live just east of the city, and we used to walk around Fitzroy Gardens, during our hour allowed time, during the day, and we just talk about anything and everything. He was having issues with staff or this or that. I thought about X, Y, and Z, and I was just saying, hey, I'm here to help. Or sometimes just want a sounding board, so I was just that sounding board for Mike. And then he ultimately reached out and said, hey, why don't you join the advisory board? And actually, we just make things official.
Amazing.
I was like, are you sure? I'm not a drone person sort of thing. I'm a cyber guy. So, and I helped him out with that. So that was quite nice. And then again with the Australian Women in Security Network, I had Jackie Lusto reached out and say, hey, well, how about if you join our board? It'd be great for you to nominate yourself. And my immediate response was, but I'm a guy.
Yeah.
Like, why would I do that? And she's like, great question. I got a pre-canned answer, which I've said 1,000 times before, and it was fantastic. So she said, but we need your perspective. If we're going to change things, we can't just say a group of individuals trying to influence another group of individuals without understanding what they're going through as well, or what their perceptions are, or what their perspectives are as well. So we need naturally people on both sides to help force that, or not force, but encourage that good change in the industry that we genuinely need.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, there you go. How have those things sort of shaped you professionally, personally?
So we were talking about this earlier. So I remember when I first joined the board of AWSN, and I went to my first event, and I was like, I'm here as a board member sort of thing. And I was at a cybersecurity event surrounded by women. I was the only male there. And it was that aha moment for me. I was like, oh, this is what it feels like. So that was a really good thing for leadership, for, in my personal life as well, of understanding, saying, walk a mile in a person's shoes kind of thing. Take that 2 seconds, 10 seconds out, and actually try to appreciate it from another person's perspective, what they're trying to achieve or what they're going through, because you never ever know what's happening at home. So have that as something you take into your leadership as well. Yeah,
great. Thank you. You joined sort of where you are now, Accent Group, which was, I think, April last year. What kind of pulled you in? That is as a CISO. So was that the appeal? Was your kind of first step into that role?
Yeah. Well, as I wanted to progress towards that role, I said, okay, well, what opportunities are out there? And I got to a point at Seek. I'm like, I think I can do this. And I'm chatting to Liam. He's like, yeah, you're definitely ready. You've been ready for, a while now. Yeah. And this goes back to the interesting point around getting that first CISO role is extremely difficult. Yep. And I went to a CIO CISO event, and because I like public speaking, I like chatting to people and whatnot, I got asked to do some emceeing work or do some group work, so facilitate a conversation. And the person that introduced me happens to be my boss now.
Okay.
So that's when I first met him. And 6 months later, he reached out. Apparently, he would have liked what I said, sort of thing. I was saying the right things from a cybersecurity lens, and he reached out and he's like, oh, hey, I don't suppose you'll be interested in a role here. We'll have one advertised, just apply online, sort of thing. I thought, well, give it a shot, see what happens. Worst case, they say no. They said yes, and here I am.
Did you ask him why he hired you?
Not yet. I should.
You should ask him that question. But again, you put yourself out there. And again, this is something which, again, harping on my point from earlier, but I think that is such a key part of career growth, is just keep putting yourself out there. Don't wait until the moment you need a job. It's something I think your career you have to keep working on, not every day, but you need to have some kind of a plan. Otherwise, it will kind of creep up on you. And I think most people I speak to that suddenly find themselves on the job market because maybe they've been made redundant or circumstances have changed or they suddenly have to find a job, they normally feel very vulnerable in that moment and very exposed and not really sure where to begin or where to start. And I kind of liken it to as a metaphor to suddenly realizing, you go to the doctor and they say you're going to have to get in shape. If you've been chipping away at that for years, slowly and surely, A, you're probably not going to have that conversation, but B, it's not such a big surprise. But when you've not done something for, say, 5 years, and then suddenly you find yourself in a gym, it's the same kind of comparison point.
And you always have to invest in yourself. Yeah. Absolutely. So when I was at Seek, Liam was going on about this thing called extreme PD, or extreme professional development, where you take a percentage of your week and you dedicate that definitely every single week towards your own professional development, whether it be online courses, YouTube stuff that you're learning something new, try to experiment with something, because naturally you're always going to bring a level of what you're learning into your day-to-day role. And cybersecurity never stands still. You have to invest in yourself. Yeah. And particularly at the moment, I was chatting to someone just recently. We had that conversation around career, and I was saying, I'm looking forward to the future. What should I be doing? And I said, if you're not learning AI, right now, then you're going to be left behind.
Yeah.
It might be nothing. It might be a big hype cycle to nowhere, but it might not.
Yes.
So definitely learn about it, have an understanding of how it works and what you can use it for, pros and cons and all those types of things. Yes, from a security lens, from a policy, we shouldn't upload personal data on it and all that kind of thing, but also how you can utilize AI and tools like that to help you become a better security practitioner.
Yeah.
And that person took that away and said, yeah, actually you're spot on. Let me invest some time into it. And I put them onto a few courses and say, hey, listen, here's a good one. I don't recommend you doing it right now. Maybe in about 6 months' time, do some pre-learning like LinkedIn Learning or YouTube or some books or whatever. There's a gamut of free stuff out there. Do that first. Get your head around the basics. So then, even if that course teaches the basics, you're a step ahead, so you can get more out of it. Because that's a course that you pay 100%. For instead of a free stuff, right?
And you did right. We don't need to take a bet at this point on whether in 10 years AI is the biggest thing that's going on in the world or not. It doesn't really matter. It's the hot ticket right now. There's lots of new stuff. I met with a guy yesterday who runs a business around swarm AI. Have you come across that?
No.
Blew my mind. I had no idea. But just educate me, explain what this is, and learn a hell of a lot about the way that Amazon and TripAdvisor and these big businesses are using SEO now, using this kind of swarm AI technology. Whether that's still a thing in 5-10 years doesn't really matter. It's still, you're kind of furthering knowledge, you're learning different ways things are happening, and you kind of find that transferability of knowledge or experience or whatever will go into another domain somewhere in something, right?
Yeah, and we saw the same thing with cloud. I remember way back when we were having this conversation, what's this cloud thing, right? And then it's everywhere now, right? Because it could have been nothing, it could have been something. And those that invested early on into understanding it, into their own learning, are doing a lot better now from like a general security practitioner or infrastructure practitioner than those that that haven't.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, awesome. I'm not sure if you've seen, but we do cards. Have you seen the cards?
I haven't.
This is a relatively new feature we started halfway through last year. This is just to try and mix things up. And I should have warned you about this at the start because you now look slightly nervous, which is I'm quite enjoying. But
Thank you.
So what I'm going to ask you to do is pick 3 cards at random, flip it over, read the question, and give us an answer.
I'm either going to love this or hate this, right? So 1, 2, and then we go to this side, number 3.
Yeah.
You ready?
Go for it.
You ready? All right, lightning round. Early bird or night owl? That one's interesting because I used to be a night owl. So when I was at IBM, I used to stay up till stupid o'clock doing all sorts of stuff. And I don't know if this is a byproduct of getting older, but I'm starting to wake up early in the morning and just getting a lot of things done in the morning.
There you go. Was that in your early days when you were hacking and probably chugging cans of Monster and
Yeah, definitely not doing my body any good at that stage.
That's right.
Card number 2?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. If it wasn't tech, where would you be working now? Honestly, I probably would have joined that police force.
Yeah.
I would have been, who knows, I would have eventually gone into high-tech crimes or something like that. Or I reckon somewhere like ASD or ASIO, I would have been quite interesting. Be a spy. That would have been pretty cool.
Everyone wants to be a spy. My daughter wants to be a spy. And we had this conversation saying, I don't think it's quite like it is on the TV.
No, I think it'll be a lot of paperwork.
It's a lot of paperwork. Yeah. It's actually interesting. So we've had two guests. One is a CISO. I think one was more, one was in security as well, who came from the police. That's John Taylor and Andrew Morgan.
Oh, right.
Both actually started off as in the police.
I didn't realise that Andrew Morgan was a police
I'm looking at Hayley now. Andrew Morgan was in the police, wasn't
he?
Yes, I'm not making that up. That's right. Yeah.
That's great.
Fun fact. There you go.
And as a fun fact aside as well, a lot of the people I was working with when I was at NAB came from the Air Force, so it's very police, military, go into kind of cyber crime kind of things. All right, card number 3. Here we go, lucky last. How do you stay on top of technology when it's rapidly evolving? Great question.
Yeah.
A lot of podcasts.
Yeah.
So obviously Tech Titans.
Obviously. Yeah.
A lot of podcasts.
Yeah.
Actually, I've just gotten back into swimming. So I used to swim quite a lot.
Yeah.
I loved it. I was, since I was little, I've been swimming. And you can buy these Jawbone kind of headphones,
Yes.
And literally, just last night, I was swimming, I just zone out, put a podcast on and just swim laps for a couple of kilometers sort of thing.
Yeah, great.
So that's podcasts. And then I'm actually doing a lot of AI-related podcasts and content. And you can use AI to summarize a whole bunch of things in the news and give you a daily feed. So that's a pretty good one as well. Conferences.
Yeah.
I highly recommend going to conferences.
Obviously B-Sides.
Obviously, B-Sides is the only conference you ever need to go to. No, so a lot of conferences, like your Black Hats, like that's like the cream of the crop sort of thing. You got your DEF CONs and you got your B-Sides, which are local. And if whatever city you're around the world, chances are there's a B-Sides close by. Yeah. So B-Sides Ballarat just started up and they're coming out in May, I think it is. So I'm going to go there, check it out.
Yeah.
But just chatting to people, and don't be afraid to just talk to people, see what they do. Naturally, people will always be excited, especially in this industry, about what they do, what they're doing on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
So definitely ask them a whole bunch of questions within reason. About what they do and how they do it and what they're working on, because you'll see their eyes light up if they're working on a cool project.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. I'm interested in the swimming. Would you ever do something like the Pier to Pub swim down in Lorne, or have you done anything like that?
Yeah, so pre and during COVID, I got to the point where I was pretty much consistently swimming about 3Ks a day, just in the pool. And that's a lot of boring laps.
Yeah,
it's a lot of podcasts as well. So what will tend to happen, I'll listen to a podcast for about 45 minutes, 60 minutes. Podcast will end, I'll just get bored and jump out of the pool sort of thing. I could have gone a lot further, I just got bored.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, what's the next step? And I was looking at swimsuits and this and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then maybe going out to swim open water.
Yeah.
And there's one down at the bottom of the peninsula as well, which I was eyeing off. It runs a couple times a year.
Yeah.
So maybe one day. Maybe I need to get fit again, I think.
Because I was reading as well about your rock climbing, mountaineering, and bike riding, and I've also seen your woodworking podcast. You're almost like the Bear Grylls of cybersecurity. If that's something you want to claim or not, but so
mountaineering was interesting because I was always into the outdoors, like going hiking, doing all sorts of things like that, and went from hiking into rock climbing, and the natural progression was, very much endangering your life in the big mountains sort of thing around the world. So it's one of those things where I wouldn't go back and do it again. It was very, very, it's like one of the most dangerous sports in the world.
Yeah.
But I'm glad I did it and I survived. And I have a lot of friends that did it around me, and it's some interesting stories, and I'll tell you all about those one day. And then the bike riding thing, it was just more fitness and mountain bike riding and whatnot. Woodworking, I love, and I think anyone that works in this industry has to have something that's not a computer.
Yeah. So
working with your hands, building things, that kind of thing, that recurring theme in my life. Building furniture around the house, or building furniture for other people, or building things for other people, I quite enjoy.
Yeah.
And then more recently, I've gotten into sailing. So I'm learning how to sail, so maybe I'll sail around the world one day.
Yeah, there you go. We actually had last year Ewan Walker. Do you know Ewan from Judo? He was at Judo Bank as CTO, I want to say. He's actually the president of the Robotic Warfare Club. Like the Robot War stuff.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
And that's in Albert Park somewhere.
It's like the battle bots.
Yeah, do you remember that back in the day, the Robot Wars and all that kind of stuff? That. Yeah, so that exists, and he's the Australian president of that club, and it's in Albert Park or something.
Did not expect that.
There you go. All right, I've got a couple of other quickfire questions for you before we wrap up. What are you most proud of in your career?
Building a really good team.
Yeah.
So if I reflect to my time back at Context, the fact that we're still hanging out, we're still good friends, we still talk quite frequently on Signal and other kind of communication platforms. Honestly, I'm quite proud that I was in a position where I was with that team, because it was, and you talk to any consultancy, especially in the pen testing space around Australia, and you talk about Context, or you go to Black Hat, or for example, and say, I worked at Context. I'm like, oh, that's good.
Yeah. And
just been surrounded by like super, super clever individuals, and humble as well.
Yeah.
Just been fantastic. So pretty proud of that.
Yeah, great. We spoke a bit about feedback. What would you say has been the most significant feedback of your career?
The best feedback, or the best piece of advice, was also the worst piece of advice.
Okay.
Right? So early on in my leadership, I got told that you cannot be friends with the people you work with or the people you manage. And I took that quite literally. And I was like, no, it's us and them. And then that formed a very work contract instead of a social contract. And there's so many negative things that come through with that. And thankfully, throughout that period, I realized that. And I really tried to claw that back because it was such a negative outcome for me. And then subsequent leadership roles, I said, we're not going to be potentially best friends or hang out on the weekend kind of thing, but we can be as well.
Yeah.
So being friends with or being polite or being professional, being good, being nice with the people I work with, I think is probably the best piece of advice and that I've been able to take on, coming from the worst piece of advice.
Yeah, there you go. So again, that's the product of being the leader based on the, not bad management, but bad advice.
That's right.
That you've kind of reflected on the why behind it. And I think you're right, by the way, on that. I think you can be friends, right? You can have a human connection, common ground. You can enjoy the company of the people that you work with and the people that work for you. But there comes a line, right? I remember once I worked with a bunch of young guys and we went on we call it a stag, but a Bucks weekend to Barcelona when I was in the UK, and it was most of my team, and I kind of realised by the end of the weekend I probably can't come on these anymore. There comes a line where I'm the boss, and there's certain things as a boss you just can't be exposed to if you're still running a team.
Yeah, and there were certain instances like that where you've gone out, you've had a few drinks or whatever, and everyone's a little bit loose, and then you get asked a question, 6 pints in or something like that. Hey,
right.
What's happening with this? And immediately you snap back into manager mode and you're like, I need to toe the company line. I want to be transparent, but I'm really not in the right headspace to have this conversation. Right. So just say, we'll talk about it on Monday.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Have you got any career regrets?
Not really. I don't like to have regrets because that kind of, it feels like I made a bad decision or a poor decision or something like that. So throughout my career, every single step I've taken has been the right one at the right time based on the right information. There's been, a handful of jobs that I've taken on where it's like, probably I shouldn't have done that one because the company wasn't ready yet to have a security person, and that's my CV for a short stint at a place. But the only regret is that I can't duplicate myself to see what else could have happened.
Oh, like a parallel.
Right?
Yeah.
Like that sliding door moment where do I go the CISO path or do I set up my own consultancy? Do I this or do I do that? Do I move to Singapore or do I not? Or that kind of thing.
So that's interesting. If you follow Daniel Pink, he talks about regret in the sense that we regret the things that we didn't do as opposed to the things that we did do.
Yeah.
So is there anything you haven't done?
Start up my own consultancy.
Yeah.
Maybe one day. It's I can do it tomorrow. I could do it in 10 years' time. So it's never, unless AI really takes over, then we'll see how we go.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Probably last question is, if you were giving sage advice to the next generation, what advice would you give?
If you're starting out in this industry, you want to get your leg into this industry, or foot into the door rather, apply to somewhere like ASD. I've seen and I've been fortunate enough to work with a lot of the people coming out of the ASD, particularly from like a red team and pen testing perspective, and the caliber, they really, really invest in their people. And when they come out into the market, they just excel, absolutely excel. So if you're new to the industry, have a look at somewhere like that.
So what's the ASD?
Australian Signals Directorate. Okay. So our NSA.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
So I think their motto is, know their secrets and keep ours, or something like that. Or something. I'm probably going to paraphrase that a little bit wrong. But if you're already in the industry and want to do something, and you want to kind of take your career to the next level, go overseas, go to the US, go to the UK, because they are genuinely years ahead of us in terms of technology breadth. And especially in the UK, my personal kind of experience was that because the competition is fierce over there, in order to, at a consultancy level, to get those good jobs or get those good gigs, also to get the jobs in the first place, you have to level up. I'm not saying we don't have good people here, but go over there, but most importantly, come back.
Yeah, but come back.
Yeah.
Got it. Awesome. Look, that's it. I think that's pretty much. I'm flat out of questions now. I feel like we've covered so much ground, and I think it's been really insightful to understand, how you've navigated through your career, but also, some of the lessons you've learned along the way, and kind of what's helped shape you. So yeah, thank you for sharing. Very generous with your time and experience. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Like and subscribe.
Thank you for listening to Tales from Tech Titans, and be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcast. If you'd like to get more insights about tech careers, then check out the Emmbr, that's Emmbr LinkedIn page for the latest updates, articles, and engaging discussions.